The monitor flatlines. The room fills with people moving fast, voices overlapping, someone calling a code. My chest takes the first shock, then the second, and then there is nothing. No pain, no fear, just nothing, and then something so enormous I still can barely hold it all in words. My name is Sarah Calloway, and I was clinically brain dead for 90 minutes before I came back. What happened in those 90 minutes changed every single thing about how I live, how I pray, and what I believe is happening right now in a dimension we cannot see. If you're new here, please subscribe. I don't post often. When I do, it's because I have something real to share, something from that place that I feel people need to hear. And before I get into what happened, I want to ask you something. If you've ever prayed and wondered whether anyone was actually listening, drop that in the comments. Right, I've wondered. Because what I'm about to tell you is specifically for you. Jesus showed me exactly what happens to every prayer the moment it leaves your lips, and it is nothing like what I imagined. Let me take you back to the morning it happened. I was 43 years old. I was a nurse. I worked ICU for 16 years, so I had seen codes more times than I could count. I knew what brain death looked like from the outside. I had stood at bedsides and watched families say goodbye. I thought I understood death. I did not. It was a Tuesday in March. I remember that clearly. I had just come off a 12-hour night shift and I was driving home. I don't remember the impact. I remember the moment before. The radio was on. I was thinking about what I was going to have for breakfast. And then I was somewhere else entirely. The doctors told me afterward what had happened to my body. A driver ran a red light at high speed. My car was struck on the driver's side. I suffered massive blunt force trauma to the chest and head. My heart stopped at the scene. The paramedics worked on me for 11 minutes before they got a pulse back, and that pulse was fragile. By the time I reached the hospital, I was in full cardiac arrest again. They worked on me in the trauma bay. The neurologist documented brain death at one point. 93 minutes passed from the time of my second cardiac arrest to the moment brain activity resumed. 93 minutes. I can tell you what the chart says because I read it myself. Months later, sitting in my own living room, hands shaking, reading about myself in the third person. The chart says there was no expectation of meaningful recovery. My sister had already been told to prepare. What was left in my body when I returned tells its own story. Both sides of my ribcage had been fractured by the CPR compressions. That is how hard and how long they worked to keep blood moving to my brain. The bruising across my sternum was deep enough that I couldn't breathe without pain for 6 weeks. I had a traumatic brain injury that required months of speech therapy just to find words again. My hands had tremors for almost a year. The neurologist told me that what she saw on my brain scans in those first days did not match the person sitting in front of her in the recovery room. She said that more than once. She couldn't reconcile what the imaging showed with the fact that I was speaking clearly and remembering things in sequence. She had no explanation. But here is what the chart does not say. The chart does not say where I was during those 93 minutes. And that is the part that changes everything. I want to stop here for a moment, because I know some of you are watching this and you are skeptical. Some of you are grieving someone. Some of you are holding a prayer that has gone unanswered for so long that you've stopped believing it was ever heard. I need you to stay with me. What I'm about to describe, what I saw with my own awareness, what Jesus showed me in that place, it matters for you specifically. When my body was dying, my awareness did not die with it. There was no tunnel, not for me. There was no darkness I passed through. One moment I was inside the experience of a car crash, and the next I was standing in a place that was made of light. Not white light the way a light bulb is white. Something else entirely. The light had texture. The light had warmth. The light was not something I was looking at. It was something I was standing inside of, surrounded by it in every direction, and the light itself was aware of me. I was aware that my body was not with me. I didn't feel afraid. I felt, and this is the closest word I have, I felt recognized. Like walking into a room and finding that the room itself already knows your name. And then he was there. I am not going to pretend I can describe what Jesus looked like in a way that will satisfy everyone's imagination. What I can tell you is that I knew exactly who he was without needing to be told. The knowing came before the seeing. There was a weight to his presence, not a heavy weight, a full weight. The way you feel when someone who deeply loves you enters the room. That kind of weight. There was also something in his eyes, and I know how that sounds, but let me try. The way he looked at me was the way no person has ever looked at me. Like he was seeing every version of me at once. Every age I had ever been. Every fear I had carried. Every moment I had prayed alone in the dark and wondered if anyone heard. He saw all of it, and his expression did not change except to become more present, more still, more completely focused on me in a way that I can only call love. He spoke first. He said, "You want to see something?" It was not a question. He said it the way you say something to a person you've known for a long time, when you know what they're carrying and you're about to help them put it down. I said yes. I said yes before I even understood what I was agreeing to. And what he showed me next? I'm going to take my time with this because I don't want to rush it. This is the reason I make these videos. This is the reason I came back willing to talk about something so personal, something so far outside what a clinically trained ICU nurse is supposed to say in public. He showed me prayer. He showed me what prayer actually looks like from the other side. And the image that comes to mind, though image is not quite the right word, was something like light leaving the earth in streams. Countless streams. Millions of them moving upward, each one distinct. And every single stream was arriving. Every one. He said to me, "Nothing is lost." I want you to sit with that for a moment. Nothing is lost. Every word you have ever spoken to God, every desperate whisper in a hospital waiting room, every prayer you said as a child that you barely remember now, every plea you made in the middle of the night when you were so tired you couldn't form sentences. He showed me that they all arrive. They are all received. They do not disappear into silence. I asked him, and this is the conversation part, the part that is still with me so clearly. I asked him, "Why do some prayers feel like they don't get answered?" He was quiet for a moment. Not the silence of someone who doesn't have an answer. The silence of someone choosing how to explain something immense to someone who can only hold so much at once. He said, "What you call unanswered is not what I call unanswered." He showed me something then. He showed me the shape of a prayer, one specific prayer, and I believe it was one of mine, a prayer I had prayed years earlier about something painful in my life, something I had given up on. He showed me the prayer arriving. He showed me what surrounded it in that place, and surrounding every prayer, woven into the very structure of how prayers exist in heaven, was the full weight of the person who prayed it. Not just the words, everything. The grief behind the words, the hope, the history. He said, "I hear the whole person, not only the sentence." I don't know how long I was in that conversation. Time in that place is not what time is here. But there were more things he showed me, more things he said. He showed me that prayer is not a transaction. I think many of us, and I was one of them, approach prayer the way you approach a vending machine. You put something in and you expect something out. And when what you expected doesn't come, you conclude the machine is broken, or empty, or that it never worked at all. What he showed me is that prayer is not an exchange. It is a conversation between a person and someone who loves them completely. And that means the response is not always the thing you requested. Sometimes the response is something that takes years to recognize as a response. Sometimes the response is something that changes you in a way that makes the original request irrelevant. I asked him about that. I said, "What about the prayers for people who still died? What about the prayers for people who suffered anyway?" His answer stopped everything inside me. He said, "Every prayer became part of what surrounded them." He showed me what that meant. He showed me someone in a hospital. I don't know who, it wasn't anyone I recognized. And he showed me the prayers being prayed for that person by family, by friends, by people who barely knew them, by strangers who had been asked to pray and didn't even know the person's face. And in that place, I could see all of those prayers arriving and doing something. Not fixing the body, something else. Something more like holding. Like an invisible structure built around a person by every prayer offered on their behalf. And that structure did not disappear when the body stopped. It went with them. He said, "No one goes alone." He did not say this to minimize pain. He said it with such tenderness that I wept in that place, whatever weeping is when you have no body. The tenderness was not the tenderness of someone explaining why your suffering was actually fine. It was the tenderness of someone who knows you're suffering from the inside, who has felt grief, who has stood at tombs and felt loss, and who is telling you that the love holding all of this is stronger than all of the loss put together. I asked him about the people I had lost. This is the part that is hardest to talk about. My mother died when I was 31. She was sick for 2 years before she died, and during those 2 years I prayed in a way I have never prayed before or since. I prayed with everything I had. I bargained. I begged. I sat in an empty hospital chapel at 2 in the morning and said words I had never said before, promised things I have spent years trying to keep. She died anyway. And for 12 years after that, I carried a kind of silent wound where my faith used to be. I still prayed, but it was different. It was careful, like touching something that might hurt. I asked him about those prayers, the prayers I prayed for my mother. He did not answer the way I expected. He said, "She heard every one." He showed me my mother. I cannot describe this part completely. There are pieces of it that belong only to me, private in a way I want to protect. But I will tell you what I can. She was there. She was well in a way that is beyond what well means here. And she was not a static image. She was herself, fully herself, the version of herself that was always underneath the pain and the illness and the limitations. She knew I was there. She was glad. That is the word. Glad. Not just happy. Glad in the way that means something has been longed for, and now it is here. She did not need to speak anything formal to me. What passed between us was immediate and complete, in the way that things in that place did not require language to be understood. I knew she had not been absent from my life. I knew she had been present in ways I had not been able to see. And I knew, this is the part that broke me open in the best possible way, I knew that the grief I had carried for 12 years was not a sign of failure or of silence on God's part. It was the shape of love continuing in a form I had not understood. The unanswered feeling of all those prayers, it was not evidence of absence. It was evidence of how much I had loved. And love, in that place, is not a thing that disappears. It accumulates. It has weight and presence, and it is known. The prayers I had prayed for my mother had not fallen into silence. They had arrived. They had been part of the conversation happening between heaven and her life on earth. A conversation longer and larger than anything I was able to see from my side. And now, from where I was standing in that light, I could see a small piece of how large it actually was. I started to understand why I had been shown this. Not just for myself. For this moment, years later, making this video, talking to people who are carrying the same wound I carried. People who prayed hard for someone, and that person still died. People who prayed for something that never came. People who have kept praying because they can't stop, but who have stopped believing it reaches anywhere. He told me, and this was near the end of our conversation, he told me, "Tell them it reaches." I came back to my body. I do not remember the transition. I remember the light, and then I remember pain, overwhelming pain, and the sound of machines, and a voice saying my name, and the terrible weight of gravity, the thickness of the physical world pressing down on me from every direction. The doctors had no clinical explanation for my recovery. The neurologist who had documented brain death was the same one who sat beside my bed 3 weeks later and told me that what had happened to me was, in her words, outside of anything she could account for. She was not a religious person. She said it carefully, the way scientists say things they don't have a framework for. She said, "I don't know what to tell you except that you're here." I am here. It took me a long time to come back to ordinary life after this. Not just physical recovery, which was long and hard and required more than a year of rehabilitation, but the inner process of returning to a world that operates on assumptions I no longer share. The world assumes that what we see is all there is. The world assumes that prayers disappear into silence unless something dramatic proves otherwise. The world does its grief in private and moves on and does not talk about the things that are hardest to hold. I no longer live inside those assumptions. I rebuilt everything from a different foundation. My understanding of why a day matters, what a conversation is actually for, what it means to sit with someone who is scared and dying. My sense of what prayer is and why I keep doing it even now, even when it's quiet, even when nothing obvious changes. I rebuilt my work, my relationships, my daily habits, every small, ordinary thing, I rebuilt it from the ground up with the knowledge of what I had seen in that place as the base. I went back to nursing eventually, but I am a different nurse than the one who left. I am present with patients in a way I was not before. When I sit with someone who is afraid, I am not managing their fear from a professional distance. I am sitting with them from a place that has been inside what they are facing. And when I hold someone's hand while they pray, and they do pray, the ones who are very sick always pray, I know, in a way that is not belief but memory, that what they're doing is real. It is received. It reaches. Here is what I want you to carry with you from this. The person you love who has died, they are held. They were not alone when they went. Every prayer prayed for them, by you or by anyone who loved them, arrived and surrounded them and was part of what carried them forward. The prayer you prayed that felt like it went nowhere, it arrived. The fact that you didn't get what you asked for does not mean you were not heard. It means the one who heard you knew something larger about what was needed. And what he knew was held in love, not in indifference. The version of yourself that broke open in grief and kept praying anyway, even when it felt pointless, even when it felt like screaming into a void, that fidelity was seen. It was recorded. In that place I could see what human faithfulness looks like from the other side, and it is not small. It is radiant. The door is not locked. The light is not distant. You are not doing this alone, even when you feel most alone. This is not comfort I'm offering you as an idea or as something I read in a book somewhere. This is something I stood inside of, something I was shown by someone who made it very clear he wanted you to know. He said, "Tell them it reaches." I am telling you, if this landed somewhere in you, if something in you recognized what I just described, even if you can't explain why, I want you to stay. Subscribe if you're not already here, and please leave a comment. Tell me what you've been carrying. Tell me what prayer feels like for you right now, today. Tell me the name of the person you've been praying for. Tell me if you've been wondering whether anyone is listening. I read these. I respond when I can. And sometimes the simple act of saying it out loud, to someone who will receive it, is the beginning of something you didn't expect. This experience is not mine to keep. It was shown to me for a reason. I believe that reason includes you, watching this today. Not by accident, not because an algorithm sent you here randomly, because something that loves you is constantly placing things in your path. The prayers you have prayed, every single one of them, have already arrived.